All right, welcome everyone. This is our part 4, our last part of our Sociocracy workshop, the 6-hour version that is being hosted through the Design School for Regenerating Earth. We're going to start with a little grounding practice. So if you want to settle in, find your feet on the floor, start taking some deeper breaths. Allowing whatever is ready in your body to soften and release. And just bringing some gentle attention to any of the areas in the body that are feeling a little tense still, that aren't ready to release. Letting them know it's okay to be wherever they're at right now. And getting curious about where in your body you would feel a sense of community. Where in your body do you feel the joy of being with others collaboratively? Where would that show up? What would it feel like? Holding that sense of collaboration and that place in your body. Imagining that you're in a circle of people, all feeling that sense of community in their bodies together. How does it feel in your body to be part of this circle of people feeling part of the community? Where do you feel that in your body? Has that sensation expanded or contracted? And coming back into your own experience, your own body, your own breath. Just offering some gratitude to your heart for showing up today. Thanking yourself for all the planning it took to be here. And taking one last deep breath, big inhale, and an exhale. And as you're ready, you can open your eyes and return to group space. All right. Welcome. Thank you for joining for this last class, or last little section here. And I want to start with our little recap and review from last time. So last time we talked about how the vision and mission of an organization are organization-wide, so they affect everyone in the organization. We talked about how aims and domains, or said another way, goals and purviews, are unique to each circle. So each circle will have their own aims and domains. We talked about how each sociocratic circle structure will have a general circle, which does the communication coordination, and a mission circle, which handles the big picture in an organization. And we talked about how delegates and navigators link the parent and child circles together. And if you remember, we did an exercise where we designed our own circle structure and just started to feel into that process and what it looks like. So I'm curious if anyone has thoughts, reflections, questions bubbling up from last time. Go ahead and throw a hand up if you'd like. Any of this get put into practice in the last week or so? Thing you'd like to share?
I can share something. Andra, it feels that every class or every session with you, then we go to our daily life and we look around and we're like, what? Why aren't they using this? You're like, come on, because it seems that the world would be an easier place. So every case is a case, right? Yeah, it's funny. I love that.
I feel that. I really feel that. It's honestly been very difficult for me to exist inside of organizations that are not using peer governance structure in some way, because it just definitely feels like the future to me. So thanks for bringing that in. And over to you, Michelle.
I just wanted to make sure it was okay. We have a organizational team building meeting tomorrow, and so Randy and I are both. Randy's not here; it's Family Day in Canada, but we both did this course, and of course, you need to build that consent. But I did pull some of your slides. I did acknowledge you. I just wanted to make sure that was okay.
Yes, please use the slides. And also, I think some of them have credits at the bottom because they come from Sociocracy for All. So I would just maybe mention them, but their slides are also fully available for use. So yes, please share the information. I want this to spread far and wide and ripple outward. And should you need any support in implementing or training your organization specifically, let me know and we could work something out. So cool. That's very exciting. And any other reflections that want to come into the space? Anything that was confusing after last time? Anything you're like, whoa, that was crazy. Yeah, Pamela.
What struck me last time was uh, just that increased sense of how much more difficult it is to try to put some of these practices into practice. And so I'm wondering about how to follow through with exercising those muscles for getting a bit of practice in uh, organizing, or having being in a sociocratic space as a sort of playpen.
Yeah, it does help to have that consistent practice. And I would say there's opportunities for in the bioregional groups that we're creating to start implementing some of these practices. And I'm even happy to come in and do some training for your whole group at the time that works for you all, so that you all get the training and you all have some sense of how to put it into practice. But also say that if you have any interest or extra time, there are a lot of volunteer opportunities at Sociocracy for All, and they run all of their meetings sociocratically, and so you get a lot of practice in that and get to do that. There's also they offer, I think every like 2 or 3 times a year they do a role play facilitation class at Sociocracy for All. It's like 6 weeks of really practicing that facilitation. Like you come together with a group of people and you get put into breakouts, and then you're practicing. You're doing role plays of facilitation strategies. So that I found to be really helpful in just building that muscle memory and those skills. I also find that if you start with a really small group that's just one circle and you really start bringing in these practices to that group, that can be really helpful because then you get the fundamentals of the meeting procedures down. And once you have that down, then kind of the circle structures become a little easier to break into. So those are some of the suggestions on how to put it into practice. But yeah, I just encourage you to start playing it around in little ways. Yeah, here and there. Thanks. And any other reflections? Michelle.
Yeah, I guess the other one was a question. I just noticed somewhat from permaculture, you ask my observation is you ask really good questions. Like my criteria would be they're gentle questions, they don't feel judgmental, and yet they kind of go deep and are very precise on a particular kind of thought point or distinction that may have been missed or may be more nuanced kind of thing. So do you oh, this is maybe it's a kind of weird question. Do you think like you're just inherently good at that, or do you do you think that sociocracy helped you develop those? Or maybe it's a combination, but just your comment on that.
Yeah, that's a lovely question. I would say that more those skills came from nonviolent communication, which I do think pair well with sociocracy. So for me, the core tenet of nonviolent communication is thinking about, okay, I have this emotion and I have this need, and if I can name what the emotion is, then I can kind of trace it back to what need is getting met or isn't getting met. And so if I approach that in a reflection, sort of in mirror, if there's some tension I'm feeling in my body or some discomfort in an interaction, I try to think about what need do I have that isn't getting met and kind of ask myself some questions or ask them some questions to help better understand where they're coming from or just allow for more communication. There's I believe it's called Verbal Dojo, which is a class online that I took at one point. And they talk a lot about, especially people who are raised female, having a difficult time externalizing. So they often, if something's wrong, they think they're the problem and they kind of go internal first. And so in order to break that freeze response of like, oh, this is my fault somehow, asking questions to buy yourself time and also help the other person introspect and think about what's coming in for them. So that's kind of, I try to default to questions if I'm feeling kind of activated, because that gives me some time to think through why I'm feeling activated and also gives them a chance to kind of explain and introspect for themselves. So I would say it's a kind of a combination of skills that I brought in. But I do think that sociocracy is a good place to put them into practice. So yeah, nonviolent communication, and if you're curious, the verbal dojo class is really lovely. So yeah, awesome. Well, thank you. That was fun. Okay, so I think I'll go ahead and get started into our presentation for today. So I'll share my screen. Okay, so today we're kind of closing up. We're talking about little odds and ends here, little tips and tricks and practices that we haven't covered so far. And we'll also have an opportunity for everyone to get another chance to role play that facilitation in a meeting and maybe deal with some objections in small groups at the end. So I'm looking forward to that and seeing how you all just move through that process. Kind of imagine being in your own organization and how do we move through making decisions in that way. So, but for now, I will start with, we'll go through operational decisions and policies and the differences there. I'll share an agenda template I created and kind of walk you through why the agenda is made the way it is and how that helps to facilitate some of these meeting practices. We'll talk a little bit about what brainstorming looks like in sociocracy and that practice and some facilitation tips that can help with getting these meetings started and just some outlier things that happen sometimes. Talk a little bit about what a community of practice is. I think I mentioned it in a previous class, but just kind of diving a little more into that. And then what does it look like to actually implement sociocracy in an organization and how I could potentially support with that. So that's for today. So jumping right in, talk a little bit about operational decisions versus policies. So if you notice, there's really only time for maybe like 3 or 4 really beefy topics in the agenda at any given sociocratic meeting. And so it's kind of not efficient if you're constantly trying to make the same decision about the same type of thing over and over and over again. So that's where the policies might come in. So if you know that there's something in your organization that you make a similar decision about all the time, or everyone always tends to agree about a particular thing, what you can do is you can set a policy. So you can say, okay, this is an ongoing procedure or behavior. It's kind of more big picture. We're going to review it on a particular cadence, and it's going to streamline that decision-making process. So for instance, a policy might be, we're going to use sociocratic processes. That's a policy. That's a procedure that the group has, that's a culture that they're building, and they should review that policy maybe once a year, maybe every 6 months. Is this still working for us? Do we need to tweak anything? Another policy might be, let me think of one here. A certain role has permission to make decisions without group consent. So maybe someone is handling really urgent matters, like maybe they're on the email thread, or they're responsible for responding to emails, and sometimes urgent emails come in. What kinds of decisions does that person have dispensation to make decisions about without bringing it back to the group if it's an urgent matter? So those kinds of policies can help a lot. And the really key thing is just that they have an end date and a review date so that we can come and check in and go, okay, is this policy working? And a lot of times in an organization, those policies are not explicit. And so it's very hard to review them because it's just kind of the way it always is, right? And so these policies are a way to try to make that transparent. What are the things, what is the cultural practices of this organization? What are they, and how are we moving with them, and how do we make sure that we're checking back in about how we're practicing these together, and are they still working for everyone? Operational decisions are more one-offs. They are detail-oriented. They don't necessarily require an end date, but they can become tedious if they get made over and over and over again. So if you notice that, oh, we keep talking about the same thing, we should just make a policy. But on the other hand, you don't want to have too many policies because you have to keep track of all the review dates, and you're like, oh man, this really only happened once or twice. I don't think we need a whole policy for that. So there's some balancing that's needed in balancing those different types of decision-making processes. And yeah, balance is key in everything in sociocracy. So balancing between how many policies you have and how many operational decisions you make. Balance between the number of circles and the bandwidth for meetings, because remembering, as we talked about these circle structures, every circle is a meeting. That is a regular meeting that happens on some frequency, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly or I like to say fortnightly and monthly, or even, every other month. So, but if your organization doesn't have the bandwidth to keep meeting in all of those separate ways, then it's important to come and consolidate the circle structure and make sure that's balanced. Make sure that you're balancing types of agenda topics. So you want to have some that are just reports, just here's what happened at a different circle that we need to know about. Some that is more report and explore, like here's a thing I'm thinking about, let's brainstorm it together, so that people have an opportunity to give some feedback before a full proposal comes to the agenda. And then actual decisions. So that's where we go through all three processes. We do questions, comments, and the consent round. And having a balance of these different agenda topics makes it so that you're feeling like there's variety in your meeting. No one's getting like really stuck in like, oh, we just talked a lot, right? We didn't make any decisions, or I didn't really feel like my input was heard in this particular opportunity, or I would have liked more time to brainstorm this. So having a balance of agenda topics can help with the group cohesion overall, and make the meetings feel good, feel exciting, and like things are getting done, but also there's a lot of feedback going on. And then again, balancing structure and culture. So sociocracy can get very in the weeds about the structure and the bureaucracy and how the notes get taken and the fancy agenda templates, but really thinking about like, what is the minimum viable product here? What can we streamline as much as we can so that this is supporting the structure and the culture that we want to build in our organization, but it's not suffocating with the amount of note-taking and policy logging and all of these things that can become tedious over time. And so really just creating balance there. And that's where every organization is going to practice sociocracy a little bit differently because of that need for balance. Every group is going to be different. And then I'm going to take you through an agenda template I made. So Sociocracy for All also has one, and I'll post both of these again in the discussion board space. But this is just a template that I made that I'm using with my clients right now that's been pretty helpful and kind of contains a lot of that information that you need to go through at the meetings. So I typically do 90-minute meetings. I find that that's a really good amount of time for having enough time for your main agenda items, but also really leaving some spaciousness for the check-in and the checkout processes. So that's what I would recommend. Also, people start to lose attention around 2 hours. So I try to make sure that we stop before that. So you'd fill in the date, you'd talk about who's present and who's absent. And this is again why you might want to know which members are actually in your circle and don't necessarily have people moving out in all the time. You might also have a section for observers if there are observers in your meetings. Start time, end time, aim and domain. So this circle template, this meeting template is specific to each circle. So each circle will have their own meeting template and therefore have their own aim and domain right here so that everyone can see right first thing on the agenda. This is why we're here and this is what we have authority over. So that can be a really helpful reminder to the group. Then you have your circle roles. So you have your facilitator, your secretary, your navigator, your delegate, and any other roles those operational roles that maybe you need a subject matter expert in the group or whatever it is. You have those here. You have what the description of their role is, just kind of in broad strokes, and then how long their term is in that role and when they get selected or when you need a selection process for that role again. So this is a really nice way to just keep track of that so that when the person, usually the secretary, is making the agenda, they can look at the dates and say, oh, we need to slot that into our agenda. We need to do a selection process for this role. So that is what keeps track of that. Here's where you have your circle policies. So if you just made a policy, you can say what's the topic or the category, what's a short description of it, when do we need to review it. So this is another really good way to just keep track. And so you can check these dates really quickly as you're making the agenda and say, oh, we need to review this policy. Let's put it on the agenda. The check-in and assess, this time is going to vary, but this is just kind of what I started with. And again, everything is very customizable to your organization, but this is a good starting place. So check in, what kind of energy is everyone bringing into the meeting? This is really important to understand the landscape of the group, and it helps. So if someone says, I just have a headache and I'm just not feeling very well, but I'm here, then it's good because oh, that person's not just being grumpy at me. They're genuinely dealing with a health thing. And so we can all have a little bit more grace for that. And it just gives us that moment of social cohesion, even if it's just a really quick one-word check-in. But it can be longer. I usually suggest 30 seconds, like 1 or 2 sentences. So then I go through announcements, and usually that's focusing on does anyone need to leave early? Is there anything we need to know about what's going to happen during this meeting? But that can also be cultural announcements for your organization, depending on how you want to run that. Then report backs. So is there anything we should know from other circles? Is there anything that happened since our last meeting that we need to talk about? And then action item review. So what happened? What did we decide we were going to do at the last meeting, and how is that going? I also think this is an opportunity to ask if something didn't get done, like asking, what's the barrier to this getting done? And can we help you overcome that barrier? And then we look at the agenda together and consent to the agenda, or object to the agenda, or reorder the agenda, whatever needs to happen. So that's a really important part of the process. And then we have our actual agenda. These are the topics that we're deciding on or exploring or reporting back on specifically. So I have a little bit of what are the types of agenda items that we might have here, just as a note. And I like to really say clearly in the agenda, is this a report? Is this are we exploring this, or are we needing to make a decision here? And you have a person who's introducing the topic. So this is not always the facilitator. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but anyone who's bringing a proposal to the group, they'll introduce it before we actually do the rounds and talk about it. They'll have a short description about it, maybe links to reference documents if needed, and then you decide on a duration. So usually, because we're doing rounds, I try to keep things maybe 10 to 20 minutes, just because we need to introduce the topic and then we need to have the conversational rounds. So leaving some spaciousness for that, especially as groups are just starting with sociocracy, it can be a little bit more time consuming because people aren't used to the rounds. But So I try to add a little bit of buffer time, but I really wouldn't have more than about 5 things on the agenda at any given time. And really having this set time so you can check all of these and say, is this still within the time allotment we have? And that can be helpful as you're making the agenda. So the backlog is things we need to talk about at some point, but it's not urgent. And we can always move these into the agenda if we find that we have more time. So that's really important. And I do want to say something I've seen groups do is when the secretary is making the agenda, they'll say, oh, so and so is going to introduce this topic, but they won't have informed that person. So when they get to the meeting and the facilitator says, okay, so and so, you're now introducing this topic. And they're like, what? I didn't know I was on the agenda. So just really important to make sure that the person who's introducing knows they're introducing so they're ready to go with that. They're not surprised. 1 second here. And then this is a place where the secretary can document any future action items that we're deciding. And yeah, we can say who's responsible for it, what do they need to get done, and when do they need to get it done. And then we do our checkout and feedback process at the end. So the secretary will just read back the new action items and assign them as needed. The facilitator will help the group decide the next meeting date and time, and then we'll do a round of meeting feedback. How did that go? What could we do better? And I will say that I really like Google Docs and their tab function. So I can make this, the meeting for today. So say this is the 216 meeting, and then I can just copy it and do the next day of the meeting. And so I can duplicate it over because most of this will not change. So most of the circle roles and the circle policies won't change. The check-ins really won't change. This is really the only thing that changes. So I can go in and change this for the date, but I have a really easy way to look back at the history of the meetings, and it's all consolidated in one Google document. So I don't have I don't know, dozens of meeting note documents to try to keep track of. I just know it's all here in these tabs. So that's the way that I am handling the agenda making process. And there's lots of other templates. I'll definitely share those on the discussion board. I'll also put a link to this one in the chat. You're welcome to use this one. Yeah, so that is that. And I will stop to take some questions if you're curious about that. Yeah, Emmanuel, any
Hey, Andrea, I have
questions
a
or
question.
reflections?
Yeah, I will. Thank you. That's good. I
Mhm.
I think I'm lucky that I've been to many meetings that you facilitated when you were doing the updates, and I loved your style. And I was wondering, I don't remember a meeting where you didn't ground us, like even before the check-in. And so I don't think it is in your agenda, or I didn't see it. Do you think it's typical in sociocracy, I would think, that it's nice to do a 2 minute, 3 minute grounding or like small meditation because so that everybody's on a. So my question, and at the end with the meeting notes, and by the way, I think more and more of us are going to leave Google, so we can find that somewhere else anyway.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
are we sharing the meeting notes with some of the people, or everybody was there, or is it accessible for everybody?
Yes. So a key tenet of sociocracy is transparency. And so ideally, the meeting notes are shared not only just to the circle, the relevant circle, but also to anyone in the organization so that they could take a look at what that group is looking at. There's a lot of ways to do that. You can have a shared Google folder. There's, other technologies available as well. You can just email it out to everybody, whatever works for your organization. So yeah, so transparency is really important with the meeting notes, especially. And as to the grounding practice, I really like doing that. And I think that the design school has been building a culture around that. And I like to start basically any event that I'm facilitating that way because it helps me settle, it helps the group settle. And I think it's mostly for me because I get nervous and I just need to take a moment. But it really depends on the culture of your group. So honestly, a lot of the sociocratic organizations that I have seen, they don't do it. But I think that just kind of depends on the culture of the group. So if you're working with a whole bunch of engineers and they're really like, we got to get things done, it might be really hard to talk them into a breathing practice. Would it still be good for them? Probably. Would it make them
Yeah,
uncomfortable?
yeah.
Probably. So it just,
The first time it would, and then they're going to show
yeah.
that they're enjoying it. Yeah.
Right. So it's just kind of like, what is the culture of the group you're coming into? Is that something you've built from the ground up? Is that a little awkward for them? And so it really just depends. So I'm grateful that I feel safe with you all bringing in those grounding practices. But yeah, great questions. Thank you. And I also noticed you put in the chat as well about for crisis management or disasters can be helpful to have a smaller group of decision makers. And there definitely can be dispensations in the governance agreements for your organization about like in the event of an emergency, and then make sure you define what an emergency is. Here's how the decisions would get made. And often what they suggest in sociocracy is if someone makes a decision that's urgent, that can't wait to the next meeting, then you put it on the agenda anyway to talk about, okay, we had to make this decision. Where's the feedback? Like, can we get some feedback about how that went and how we should have handled it in the future? So you still put it on the agenda to talk about, like, did that work? Was that okay? You know, I had to just make this decision.
Yeah.
I needed to make an executive decision, but still talking about it as a group to make sure that you can build
Because
in those processes.
Andrea, when I was writing that, it made me think France, the French government, other government can do that sometime where you're in a very tough situation. The country is hurting, like terrorist attack mainly. And so then you go, okay, this is going to be an emergency situation. So the country feels, good. But then also we know that during that moment, it's when decisions are made that, just same here with executive order, that you're like, wait a second, this has nothing to do. So we need to have a backup.
Yeah.
So we can't just let two people just decide and then they run away with it.
Yeah. And that's why you put it on the agenda even after the decision is made, so that feedback process is still in place. Michelle.
Yeah, I was just thinking of it wasn't a sociocracy organization. It was oh, those Robert's rules. That's how they ran the meeting. And it is basically working through a process. It was a church, still is a church, and they still have the warming center, which was funded by the municipal government. But there was a little bit of needing to move quickly because another warming center didn't meet approval, and it was already winter in Canada, and that's when you need warming centers when it's cold and wet and whatever. And so there was a meeting where there was a whole lot of discussion, not in rounds, but then there were some pieces that were missing, and we ended up we didn't even have a Zoom meeting. It was an extra piece by email. And it was basically, it was a round of, this is what we found out in the response to the questions. Are we ready to go ahead? And then people, I think everyone said yes. But would that also happen in sociocracy, or would you try to do the email into a round? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, you can do that. I think it's important to have some flexibility around decision-making processes. I think especially for like boards of directors, they sometimes need to make quick decisions. And so you can seek consent on email, I think in the same way. It doesn't need to, necessarily go in a round. And then if that causes friction, though, if for whatever reason someone says, that didn't work for me, then putting it on the agenda can be helpful to talk through, like, what about that didn't work for us? Or do we want to change that policy? Or do we want to create a role in the circle so someone can handle that particular thing and have authority over making those decisions? So those are some things. But yeah, absolutely use email if that works for your group, and just check in about it every once in a while. And then Liz is asking if Robert's rules of order are effective or too rigid. And I think that, in my opinion, sociocracy is kind of a level up from Robert's rules of order. It's talking about it's giving a different set of processes that are actually designed to help build social cohesion and build culture, as well as get through the meeting effectively. And I think my impression of Robert's rules of order is that it's prioritizing the effectiveness over the social cohesion and the culture building. So that's my take, but yeah, curious and feel free to respond in the chat with more about that if desired.
Andra, I have a quick one. Feedback. Is it important that we ask for feedback with at each session, or maybe like every 3 sessions? And do we have a document where we're asking people to go ahead and say, is it better than just like a poll, like what you did, so that to see how we're doing, even to prepare for the next one?
Yeah, I think that having a variety of feedback methods is good. So, because some people really like to verbalize, some people like to write it down. So, doing a round of meeting feedback at the end, and then doing, any time that a policy expires, going through a round of feedback in the meeting is really helpful. And then, especially after an event or, something that was maybe more of a one-off thing, I might send a survey or a poll out so that to give a little extra time for people to write out their thoughts. So I would just say using a variety of strategies. And then also thinking about who do I need feedback from? Do I just need feedback from the people in my circle? Did this affect people bigger than my circle? And thinking about making sure that you're getting feedback from all of the people who were affected, so that you can really design those processes that work well for everybody. Okay, I'm going to keep going in our little presentation here. A couple more things to go through. So I will share my screen again. All right. So I mentioned that I wanted to make sure we had some time to talk about how brainstorming works in sociocracy. So I'm just going to go through that a little bit. So why might you need to brainstorm? Maybe this is obvious, but thinking about if there's a circle-wide problem, but you don't really know what the answer is. So an example that I like is, okay, we keep losing the keys. What's the deal with that? Why are we losing keys? We have to make all these new keys. It's getting expensive. We need to figure this out. What's going on? So really just offering and opening it up to the group to come up with a solution together. Or, yeah, again, it's not fully clear what the problem is, or there's ongoing stress about a particular topic. Like there's something that, maybe there's an interpersonal issue, or maybe there's something that's just not feeling right, but we can't figure it out. We're not ready for a solution yet. We have to understand the problem first. So those are why you might do brainstorming in sociocracy. So I like to think about, we've talked about the 3 rounds, the question round, the comment round, and the decision round, or the consent round. And I like to think about the brainstorming process as just doing that 3 times. So you have 9 steps of this process. So we want to make sure that we're understanding the problem, we're exploring like possible solutions to the problem, or just like what would this look like? And then we're making a decision about like, okay, yeah, actually, and I think the next slide might actually make more sense here. So breaking it down into, okay, what is the trigger? What are the patterns that are causing this problem to occur? And then doing a comment round to explore, like, what do you need to feel like this problem is solved? And then deciding like, okay, all right, as a group, here are all the needs. And like the facilitator might do that synthesizing process of like, okay, I'm hearing that this and this and this are needs that we need to address. Is that like true of everyone? I'm checking in to make sure that your need is represented in this statement. So we have sort of like a need statement on how we resolve this problem. And then we move into, okay, let's actually generate the solutions. Now that we understand the problem and the needs that need to get met, now we move into, okay, how do we actually generate a solution? And so we're thinking about like, okay, so in order to get these needs met, what types of things would need to happen? And you make a list of that together. You might do rounds, or this might kind of be more popcorn style. You're going to explore various proposal ideas, and then the facilitator is going to try to put all of the ideas into a proposal. So we're really not trying to narrow it down too terribly much. We're like, okay, great. Can we do all of these? Or they might pare it down to like, well, this set of decisions kind of makes sense together. And then they'll see, okay, can we approve this proposal? Can we, do we understand what the proposal is? Do we have comments about that? And then can we consent to that? So if at that point the facilitator is like, well, we're going to do this and this and this and this and this, and then you do the question round and they're like, okay, well, we don't have enough people to do that. Or do we have enough people to do that? And you kind of narrow it down during the last approval process. Like, okay, what is actually feasible about this proposal and how we want to solve this problem? So I just wanted to name that this is kind of how brainstorming can work. This process can take a long time. So this is really good for maybe like a bigger, maybe annual visioning session with your organization. Like, okay, we have this big problem. How are we going to brainstorm ourselves through it? That can be really good. I would say like 25 minutes is a good amount of time to really dig into this, especially if people are unfamiliar with this process. But you can do it shorter as you get more familiar with the rounds and how to think about like, okay, what are the dimensions of the problem? What are possible solutions? And how do we narrow down those solutions to make it work? So that's kind of what that looks like. And then something that can happen in brainstorming, but also just in general in any agenda topic, is you try like another topic gets in somehow. You start talking about a different thing. Like someone's doing a comment round and they're bringing in something totally unrelated, or there's like, oh, but there's lots of different things that can happen. So I just want to talk briefly from a facilitator's standpoint about those things that can happen and how to bring those back. So the first type of thing where a second topic comes in is it can just be topic drift. So we're talking about one thing, someone brings in a totally different thing, and now we're talking about a totally different thing, and the comment rounds are not we're not talking about the actual proposal on the table. And so as a facilitator, I would maybe stop the group. I would restate the proposal, say, okay, we really want to focus on this proposal. And one thing I often say in facilitating meetings is, that would be a great thing for you to bring as a proposal to the next meeting. We don't really have time to talk about it right now. It's not on the agenda. Will you please bring a proposal about that to the next meeting? And that can be really helpful. You might also find that as you're facilitating an agenda item, it starts to split. It's like, are we talking about this? Or are we talking about this? And there's not clarity about the proposal. So some way that you can deal about this, you might actually split it into two agenda items. Like, okay, you know what? I'm hearing that we actually need to talk about two separate things here. So let's do this one, this meeting, and we'll split the next one into the next meeting. Or you might need to rework the agenda item. Like maybe it just didn't have enough clarity at the beginning anyway. So that's something that just to pay attention to as you're facilitating. Are we disagreeing about what the topic actually is? Do we have clarity around that topic? Then the third type of topic drift is dependency. So you might find that you're trying to make a decision about hiring. So you really, as maybe you're a permaculture group and you want to hire an educator. But then you realize that, oh, before we can hire an educator, we have to check in with the finance circle and make sure we have the budget. So how do we decide that it's okay to hire someone if we don't know if we have the budget yet? So there's kind of like, well, A depends on B and B depends on A, and it's kind of confusing about how to deal with that. So one thing that you can do as a facilitator is add sort of a dependency clause to the proposal. So you might say, okay, well, depending on whether or not the finance circle says we have the budget for it, we approve for us to hire an educator, right? So then you go check in with the finance circle and make sure the budget can fit it, but you still have group consent already ready to go as soon as you know that. Excuse me, I have a little frog in my throat. But that's one way you can deal with the dependency. And then, yeah, it can get really tricky and it can become like a very chicken and egg situation. And so sometimes you need to have two circles that have dependencies. You might have, okay, well, we need to check in with the finance circle about the budget, but we also need to create a whole other circle to handle the educators. And so we need to check in with the coordination circle to make sure that that all works. And so you might have to build in multiple dependencies to handle the topic drift. But this is these dependencies are a little more rare, I would say. What's more common is the topic drift and the topic forks. So really just making sure you have clarity on your agenda items. Okay, and then my last little thing, and I will take questions after that again, and we'll move into our facilitation role play. So I mentioned a couple times ago, I think, about communities of practice. So there are some times when your group wants to meet, but they don't necessarily want to take notes. They don't want to make decisions. They're just getting together to have a good time or to have an event together. 1 second. And that's great. That's wonderful. That really helps with social cohesion and cross-pollinating in your group. And that's wonderful. So we call those communities of practice. So that could be in one of the organizations I'm helping with Sociocracy. They have a heart meeting and they just come together and talk about how they're feeling about all of the work that they're doing. And that's great. And you don't need to take notes for that. You're not really making decisions. You're coming together to be people together. And that's wonderful. So, but it's sometimes nice to just acknowledge like, oh, this is another meeting that we have as a group. And so if you show someone, say your circle design structure, and they're like, well, what is this meeting over here? Can I join it? Can I be part of it? This can also be a really good place for the whole organization to come together. So in Sociocracy, everyone's kind of divided into circles, and maybe they're in multiple circles, but sometimes you want to see the whole. And so these communities of practice can be really good for, oh, yeah, I forgot you were part of this organization. And just keeping that social cohesion up in the group. So I just want to name that as an option. Great. Yeah, and sometimes things like book clubs can be communities of practice, or like we're all learning together can be a community of practice. So those are some options. And okay, I will see if there's any questions, and then we can go into our facilitation practice. Any questions or reflections on that little section?
Actually, a little question.
Yeah.
Andrea, do we have a platform where we keep, let's say, a group of 15? We meet every 2 months or every month. But so there are changes in between or articles that you want them to read or something, and you want to make sure that they each get that information. So just not only because they look at your Instagram or something. So do we have like a platform where we keep them, we create that and we're like, okay, this is my update in between? Did you talk about that before?
I
Maybe we did.
haven't. There's a lot of different technological solutions for that, and I'm not super well versed on which one might be good for which scenario, but can be just something you put in a Google Drive, could be something you share over email, could be something like the design school where there's lots of places that you can put things. Discord is actually another good place that allows you to have categorical channels that you can drop information into so people can self-select. Like, I really want to know about education, but I really don't want to know about, I don't know, the administrative stuff. So Discord can be really nice because people can opt into notifications or out of notifications as desired. So I found that to be helpful. But there's lots of different, you can do that with Telegram. There's lots of different options for that. So I kind of just have to figure out which, I often ask my new clients, which platforms for communication are you currently using and which ones are working and which ones aren't working? And then I try to find a solution for wherever the gaps are. Makes sense. Okay, great. All right. Well, I think I'll go ahead and get these breakout rooms. Oh, okay. Liz first.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I did have a question about silos. I noticed there's a lot of meetings I attend, a lot of these groups are doing the same thing, but they never get outside of their silos. And it seems like nothing gets done and meetings last forever and all that. I get frustrated. So my question is there any tools or technologies that help with more networking with people? Because I know Robert's rules, it's just very, strict and you get things done. And I was wondering if there's a way to be able to communicate with other people, especially in other nonprofits or organizations, kind of like, where, they have the similar goals, but somehow a structure where you can actually talk to people, and it would be great to ask someone from their group to be a guest speaker in my group so that we're not, silos and things like that. Because I just feel everything is always a silo. And I feel like I'm going to the same meeting over and over again. It's just a different organization, the same topic, it's just frustrating. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that in. I don't know that there's specifically suggestions for that in sociocracy. I might say that you could assign a role, create a role in maybe like your outreach or communication circle, whose job it is to research other similar organizations and try to create partnerships with them and maybe invite those guest speakers. I think that the breaking down the silos is something that takes a lot of labor. Like it's something that you have to really make a decision and a commitment that it's important to your organization that you're breaking down those silos. And so I think your organization would have to take the first step in, okay, how do I research these other organizations? How I do some of that networking? You might go to conferences to meet those organizations. But I would also say that it can be really helpful to find a vision. So the vision, you're going to have lots of organizations that fit that same vision, or a similar vision, but the mission hopefully is going to be a niche that you are filling, that your organization is kind of unique in. And so thinking about what piece of reality are we trying to change, and are we trying to change that in concert with these other organizations trying to change the same thing, or what is our particular domain as a whole organization? What do we have authority over? And often that's getting location based. So, okay, in my particular city, there's no one doing this piece. And so our organization is coming in to fill that gap. But I do think assigning a role in maybe your outreach circle for that kind of research and bringing in other people and making sure that there's a flow of information, that's something that I think all of us have to take a piece of to really to disassemble those silos and make sure we're communicating between organizations. Did that help answer your question? Okay, great. Cool. That's a lovely thing to be thinking about. Yeah. And I kind of think about sociocracy as a tool, and you can use a tool in so many different ways. So there's not necessarily like a particular process for breaking down silos, but you can use a lot of the tools to help support that process. That makes sense. All right, I'm going to introduce our little facilitation role play, and then I will ask if we have any questions about that. So I will be sharing this slide deck with you so that you can make changes on your own. And I would really encourage for whoever hasn't had a chance to facilitate and wants a chance to try to facilitate in this process to be the facilitator. So there's going to be 4 roles in this. And if there's a 5th person in your group, that's okay. Or if there's 3 people in your group, that's also okay. People can hold multiple roles if necessary. Or if you don't have a role, then you're still a participating and voting member of the circle. You can still be that. You might just not have a particular role. But in this case, we have 15 minutes to think about neighborhood resources and creating a hangout space. So I gave you an organizational aim. So your organizational aim, your goal, is to establish resilient communities through mutual aid and neighborhood relationships. And so the particular circle meeting that you're inside of is you're the outreach circle. And the goal of the outreach circle specifically is to design creative events and opportunities for people to engage with their neighbors to build trust and care. So that's the whole goal of the circle. This particular proposal, we would like to establish a point in the neighborhood once a week during summer when volunteers set up a table with neighborhood resource handouts and extra chairs to encourage conversation and neighborhood craft time. And the term is 3 months, after which we will review to see if we want to continue it next year. So that's the proposal. And so we have several roles. We have the facilitator and then the proposer who's bringing the proposal to the group. So they'll introduce the proposal to the group. And the proposer is going to have to be the person doing the most role play because they're going to have to make some things up. But I gave you a lot to work with here. So just play with that, have fun with that, lean in. The objector is someone they're going to object during the consent round. And so they might mention that they're uncomfortable with something in the comment round. And then when it gets to the objection round, they'll object and they'll say why. So I offered some possible objections here. So maybe 3 months is too long, or I'm not sure this will help us achieve our aim because, and then you'll see as a group, if you can work to create a solution for that objection together by doing another set of rounds. So I also included When you have an objection, you're going to go back through that question, comments, and decision round. So making sure you understand the objection, making sure you talk through and comment on the amendment ideas, and then create a new proposal and seek consent. And then if you can have a little bit of extra time at the end, once you've established consent or not, that's also okay, then coming out of the role play and doing a round of feedback of like, how did the facilitation go? How did that feel? What would you have changed? And just exploring that. And then the note taker can take really light notes about how this process went and maybe kind of write down the new proposal as it comes up. The notes can be pretty light here, just kind of a way to practice. And yeah, any questions about this practice? And Julie.
No apologies. So handling an objection is actually just repeating the question, comment, decide. That is handling an objection.
Yep. So you're going to say, okay, thank you for that objection. You might finish the consent round so you can check if there's other objections first, so you can deal with them one at a time. But yeah, finish the current round, whatever round you're in, and then you'll go around and you'll ask, does everyone understand the objection? Does anyone have questions about the objection? And then does anyone have suggestions about how to deal with that objection as the next comment round and then that decision round? So yeah, you just kind of do the rounds again, basically,
Okay.
to integrate that objection. Any other questions before we get started with this? And I'll be coming around to rooms in case you need technical support or anything like that. There's also there's specific slides for each group, so you'll have your own slide to work on. All right, let's give it a shot. We'll stop sharing here and I'll send you into breakout rooms.
Good luck, everybody.
Okay, welcome back. That was fun to watch you all just kind of see and play with it. And yeah, it was really a lovely little process there. So I want to see if there's any reflections on the process. Can be anybody. We're just going to do kind of group reflections on that. What was difficult? What was surprising? What questions do you have bubbling up? How did that feel in your body? Yeah, any thoughts, reflections? Yeah, David.
Since in our small group I was in mid-reflection when we got cut off, I will just continue it. I was saying that the objector's role, I was the proposer, but the objector's role I think was valuable because it forced clarification of perhaps a vague proposal or maybe a impractical proposal. And so yes, even though there's a moment of discomfort as a proposer saying, like, wait a minute, it's actually very valuable.
Beautiful. Yeah, really great reminder that objections are gifts. Yeah, great. Yeah, and over to you, Michelle.
Well, we were in the same group, so it was David's proposal and I was objecting. And our facilitator did remind us about it being a gift because I'm like, I was told to object, and she's like, it's a gift, so that Julie did that. It was quite lovely. But I gotta say, so I spent I don't know, 15, 17 years as a lawyer. So it's maybe inherent that I get caught up on procedure, right? And I found that this process made it much nicer to kind of, word it as an objective. Because in ours, the backstory was the executive was telling us to do something. And the proposal was, where are we going to put the table? And it's like, come on, it's our decision, right? So it really de-escalated it, and it separated that emotional thing to say, well, I'd like to discuss this first, And then it would have taken longer. But I mean, the other alternative is if you didn't have that process, we'd end up picking where to put the table, and maybe we didn't even think it was a good idea. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Beautiful. Thank you for that reflection. Yeah. All right. And over to you, Julie.
Oh, where's the rest of the groups? Anyway, I was in that same group with David and our objector, Michelle. It was slippery being a facilitator. It was, I mean, just doing the facilitator routine, I think I need to practice, but having an objection made it like, let's see, what do I do next? So it was, yeah, I just have to say it was slippery.
Yeah, it can be a lot to keep track of as a facilitator. And I think one thing I run into is, oh, there's an objection. I have to figure it out. I have to solve the problem. But reminding myself, like, nope, I have help. Everybody is a participant here. We're all practicing our agency. So yeah, it's really good to source help from the group. And Pamela.
Well, slippery is a really good word. I felt that, and I also felt a kind of tension between being in kind of a hybrid space where we're on the one hand working towards trying to work within this framework, and on the other hand, it's rogue. And that part, I didn't know um, how to move into being a facilitator when the space hadn't yet been defined.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was an interesting feeling of tension and dis-ease because I wasn't certain of how my role was supposed to play out in the in-between space. But that said, it is also really good to feel the discomfort of being in a role when you don't really know how it goes. And so again, that reminder of how important practice is because you just don't know until you try.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for
Yeah.
being vulnerable in that for sure.
And it hurts too.
Yeah.
I was in a group. I can dovetail on that because it keeps on reminding me when we're kids, when we do pretense and we play role, there's a moment when you play where we all agree that this is it. Now we're starting. So I'm the teacher, I'm the mother, you're the father, and that's it. You don't go back to what you were. I think that's a good, I just thought about that again in this exercise, but also, I mean, for the facilitator or anybody who is going to show up at the meeting, I think in our mind, we're already thinking of what the objections may be. So, like, it's not like it's showing up unless it's a crazy one. We cannot know. Jack said he was worried about not having enough staff. And so that was kind of okay. We kind of knew that this one would come. So we can maybe prepare a little bit instead of not.
Yeah. Oh, those are such juicy comments. I do want to go back to Pamela's a little bit and say that, yeah, I think practicing discomfort is so important because, as I mentioned, if you never have objections, if you're in your group, you might not have a healthy group. You don't have a place where people feel comfortable objecting. And so it's really good to practice that discomfort and build the resilience of knowing that we can work through it together. And yeah, and then also naming that I threw you all into a group. You may or may not have known each other. There was no social cohesion or very little social cohesion other than the fact that you're all in this class together. And so it's much more helpful when you're building that culture together and you know your organizers, you know your collaborators, you have an idea of what they will object to, like Emmanuel said. And so yeah, so that can be really helpful. And yeah, just being in that discomfort, allowing yourself to practice, being vulnerable together, all of that's really good. It's kind of making me wonder if I should start some of these just like practice sessions here in the school so that we can just keep doing this and everyone can get some practice with it. So maybe I'll figure out a way to set that up once I come back from my parental leave. But okay, any other last reflections on that round? Yeah, Sophia.
I was also in that group, and it didn't occur to me till we got back in the meeting here that some of what the objections were was raising dependencies. Do we have enough staff? Are there enough people in the neighborhood for us to even consider a weekly meeting, and what does that mean? And when I think of it as a dependency, um, it makes the objection not like so personal. It's like we're ferreting out the dimensions of the issue, and so that helped.
Yeah, when I was watching the groups and just kind of getting a little taste of your conversations, I was really impressed with the ways that you were figuring out ways to shorten the term or do some research and then report back. Like those are really good ways of still moving forward with the proposal, but not doing it to that maybe that big of a degree. And so yeah, that was really, really beautiful work that you all did in that way. I'm going to read the question in the chat here. Can we use some of the framework of sociocracy as a way to frame questions or phrase an objection, even if sociocracy has not been selected as the process? Yeah, I do think that introducing rounds into spaces that even aren't familiar with sociocracy can be helpful, just to have that as a practice. There's little things you could do. And in fact, that's maybe a good segue into the last little few slides I have here. So maybe I'll just do that. So just to close this up here. So thinking about, okay, where do you take this now? What do we do next? For one, I have another set of classes coming up in August. If you want to do more practice, you want to do another deep dive, you want to bring other people from your organization, you want to really do some practice, it's twice as long. So it's 6 2-hour classes. So that starts in August, and the information is in the discussion board if you want to do that. And it sounds like I'll also be creating a little practice cohort, facilitation role play cohort that's specifically diving into that. So that'll be fun. But otherwise, bringing it to your groups, starting with check-ins, doing some meeting feedback at the end of meetings can really help build that cohesion, starting to practice some rounds, identifying the meetings you already have within an organization and asking yourself the question, are they circles? Do they have authority? What do they have authority over? How do they relate to the other circles? How do they relate to the other meetings? Are there roles in these circles that we can select, or are they kind of implicit? So just kind of asking those questions, getting curious, and then thinking about who currently has power in the organization. Is it explicit power? Is it implicit power? Is it just because they founded the organization? Is it because they have the most bandwidth? And are they happy with that? And what do the people in power need to feel safe handing some decisions off? And really like going through, and it really helps often to have someone who's doing a lot of work in an organization list all of their tasks and like, what kind of things would you like to hand off to other people? Which kinds of things are you tired of making decisions about? That can be a helpful way to start mapping the power in your organizations. And then if you were to have an organization that needed some more support, you wanted some documentation, you wanted some training about how to do this in practice with your whole group, you wanted help drafting governance agreements and implementation plans, you want help designing the circle structure for your specific organization, and you just want kind of ongoing, and essentially, I like to call it like organizational therapy. Like what's going right? What's going wrong? What are the tools that I know that I can provide and offer in that support? That's kind of what consulting would look like. So I work through the whole implementation process with clients, or I do kind of one-off consulting with people about specific problems that they're having. So those are some options if you're curious about moving into a deeper way of transitioning into sociocracy with an existing organization you have. I can also work with groups that are just getting off the ground and really want to get sociocracy embedded in their practice and their culture from the beginning. So those are some things that I help with as a consultant. And yeah, I just also I'll share this slide deck on the discussion board again, but I have some meeting facilitation videos if you want to review those. I have some hand gestures for meetings that are really fun to bring in and can bring in more participation. I also have a video in the resources on the class space where you can check out the video with the hand gestures. Academy Level 1, if you want to really get certified as a sociocracy facilitator. I'm also going to start start a facilitation certification course probably at the end of 2026 this year. So if you want to get your certification, so you absolutely can facilitate meetings and teach other people how to do that, then that's one option through Sociocracy for All, or I'll also be teaching a class later this year. Agenda templates, both from Sociocracy for All and the one that I showed you. And so these are links. And then I just want to say that I am doing this for free, and it's been really helpful for me to do this so that I can learn and practice and get some feedback and things. But if you did want to support my efforts, I do have a Patreon here. It's also listed in the discussion board on the design school. But just in case you want to help out with my practice right now, I'm doing everything as a volunteer in basically every area of my life. So we're working on right livelihood and sustainability, but it's taking time.
The only volunteer is going to be the parenting now. That's the only volunteer thing you do.
That's fair.
But you know what also came to mind? Oh, thank you so much for all your work. It was really, really fun. I can't wait for the Sociocracy. But also, do you know the way that Anneliek does the family constellation? I think it's a good practice also, for instance, for me, the PDC project that we presented last week, with Pete and Megan and Salva, as we're building a creative agency. We're going to use Pete's presentation on Wednesday, Ask Quest, and then it would be fun to apply Sociocracy from the beginning. So we can be an example if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Definitely. Let's talk. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming to this class. I really loved teaching it. It's been a joy, and I've heard the ways that some of it's rippling out, and it's making me really happy. I also dropped into the chat a little feedback form. I'll also post it in the space in the school. And there's a question about where the discussion board is, and it's in that collaborative governance space. So there's tabs at the top when you go into the design school. You click collaborative governance, and then there's a discussion board and the class resources. So we can keep talking there about questions you have. And yeah, if you need to leave, it's all good. But yeah, and thank you so much for being here. This has been a really big joy. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but I will be here in case you have extra questions.
I'm wondering, Andrew, if you could do a quick round, because I'd really like to hear what everybody's takeaway was. And I just thank you so much. This has been a tremendous help for me to as much know what I don't know as also getting breadcrumbs towards what I can learn. This is really invaluable, and I'll be talking to you more about some things later, but I just think that this has been one of the most generous and rich food spaces that I've been in for quite a long time, and I thank you very much.
Oh, that's very sweet. Yeah, for people who want to stay, I'm happy to do a round. Maybe we'll start with Julie, since Julie, you had your hand up there for a minute, and I can go around.
Well, my hand up was, I'll do both quickly. My hand was up just to encourage, and I was specifically thinking of you, Pamela. It's funny you asked. But anyone, while Andrew's busy learning to be a parent, anybody who wants to reach out to get together to practice together, I'll show up. We can set something up. And, this heals so many wounded doors. Yeah. It's just amazing, Andrew, what you offer. And I wish, all the good things that everyone says is true, and much more about you. You know how much I adore you and appreciate you. But yeah, I do want to encourage people to contribute to her Patreon. I don't know if you shared your lost laptop story in the design school when I wasn't watching, but yeah, she lost her laptop at some point, had to buy a new one. But yeah, you do so much for free, and we need to support you more. Anyone who's able to contribute, please do. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, and I want to offer for this feedback round, you can feel free to throw some throw some thorns in if you want. I'm still learning, so please give me feedback, and that will help with me designing the future courses as well. So thank you, Julie. That was very sweet. And I've got a big blush. All right, let's go over to Pamela.
Oh, I think I've already said my
Oh,
bit. I'd like to hear what everybody else. I mean, I could go on, and I would love to give you some critical feedback. And if I think of anything, I'll let you know. Because I know it's helpful to have that, but nothing comes to mind offhand. So maybe I'll just pass it on to David since he's to my left.
okay, great, thank you.
Great. Well, I just want to acknowledge the incredible talent and in organizational work that you put into this. As someone that is sort of organizationally inept, I really appreciate some people who can do this stuff. And so yes, thank you.
David,
And I'll pass it to Sophia.
Hi. I appreciate the depth. You told us about the role-playing class, and I took that, the other one. And there's a range of being able to use sociocracy to get things done really well, efficiently. And I think you, Andra, bring a depth to it that Emmanuel referred to today, with the grounding, with your presence, with your questions. And I am hungry for that, because that to me is where the flexible cohesion that our world and culture need so much now comes from. So that to me builds up, expands with sociocracy, and just your answers are so practical and worldly, and it's a wonderful combination. So I wish you the best.
Oh, that's very, very sweet. We'll go over to Sahir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrea. I joined design school just because of this course, because one of my friends suggested, and this is my first course and first time I'm learning about design school, what everything is going on here. And I didn't know anything about sociocracy before joining this course. And now I feel that, yes, I know something about it, and I can start applying small things, at least feedback, my key takeaways, feedback, consent, and handling the objections as a whole group, and several roles, circles. These are the things in my mind. And yeah, thank you very much for this structured and very well explained, very informative sessions. I learned a lot from you and also from everyone here. Actually, listening to each other was also teaching. The breakout sessions, doing something in practice also was very helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, love to hear that. Beautiful. Yeah, I'll pass it to Michelle.
So yeah, I would echo the accolades. I also so I had actually a question that you may not answer right away in terms of contemplating for your own professional development. I think those questions are important. But I also wanted to comment that you talked about sociocracy as a tool, but I think it's when people are talking about the depth and all of that, I think it's something that is very well suited to creating a culture that is for resilience and regeneration. It's if you think of governance, like there may be other governance models that people could choose, but it seems to be more than a governance model. It seems to have that aspect of culture, and I think that you model that part in a way that really makes me want to follow in your footsteps, or ask you to be my mentor. So I know you're younger than I am, but I sometimes, it's good to have good to have your mentors across generations. So, and then in terms of like kind of feed, like that, to think about it is I think there's a strategy that, and you may have explicitly considered it, but you could choose to explicitly share or not share, and that's kind of letting people know ahead of time about the discomfort and how much discomfort and what the learning benefit is of the discomfort. Like, one school of thought would be, don't tell them ahead of time, let them do it. One school of thought would be give them a hint or tell them later. And I just, kind of thought that would be a place to go in terms of, and not necessarily doing it the same way every time, but that would be my thing to kind of give that some thought, because there's some benefits both ways, right? Yeah. So I just yeah. And if you have a response to that, it would be interesting to hear it, but I don't want to put you on the spot for that.
Yeah. Let's finish the round with Liz, and then maybe I can circle back to that. Liz, any feedback?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to make, I did it as notes or bullet points, but I liked under how you're able to provide a solution when we had a question about something. You gave really good solutions on how to solve whatever issue we were having, and you asked really great questions. I like it. I think there was a book called Ask Questions, something like that. And if, instead of making comments or stating something, just turning it into a question, like my permaculture instructor, she would always ask something like a question, and it actually made you think instead of being talked to. And the other thing that I do like about the sociocracy and this whole thing, I love facilitators because I experienced a series of meetings with a facilitator. It was extremely helpful with the group, and I find that when I participated in organizations that had Roger's rule, it was just a decision-making process. What's let's vote on this, and that's the decision. But I think with sociocracy, to me, it's more like there are more discussions, and the discussions are there, and it really solves the problem. They're like actionable items. You actually get somewhere, which that's why I get frustrated because everything else is, and I do appreciate Michelle, the attorney's because attorney thought process, I really like her point of view as an attorney compared to my view and other people's. I like other people's views too. And that's why I like the whole sociocracy. I get to see their viewpoint. And where in Roger's rule, that didn't really matter that much. We just got to the answer as quick as possible, moved on to the next agenda item. That's it.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, lovely. Beautiful. I'm glowing and smiling really hard. It's hard to talk when I'm smiling so big. But yeah, no, I really appreciate all of the feedback. And with Michelle's question about talking about discomfort ahead of time, I think that's a really good thing to bring in. I think I definitely experiment with that. I think it's interesting as a teacher, I guess, bringing a course to a group. There's some amount of, I have a run sheet. I have like, this should take approximately this long, and here's some instructions I can give. Some of it is just necessarily on the spot, on the fly. And so sometimes I'm just like, oh, I'm noticing that there's some discomfort. Maybe I should talk about that. And I think, yeah, bringing that in ahead of time can be a good thought. So I'll definitely make a note of that and play around with it. I think every time I teach something, I teach it a little bit different. And so I get to experiment with how did that work? How did it go? How do I want to iterate on it going forward? So I really enjoy running those experiments. And it was actually really fun because when I was trying to design the facilitation role play, I was like, what do we want to decide on? And I've actually been thinking about setting up a neighborhood table. And so I was like, what if I just have everyone do some brainstorming for me about that and poke holes in that? So I might just do that going forward. Like, oh, what's the thing I want to try? And how can I have other people try it out for me? So that was great. That was really fun to hear all of the reasons you wanted to poke holes in that idea. And I loved it. So thank you. All right, you all. Well, I hope that we can keep discussing in the little school space that we have, and I look forward to seeing you all in some of the practice sessions. So enjoy and yeah, go well into your day. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks to everybody.
You have another second.